For 5 years, Emily Parker drove her father to every appointment. She managed his medicine, organized his pills, and gave up her own plans to take care of him. Her sister Sarah visited only a few times in 5 years. When their father's will was finally read at the lawyer's office, every dollar went to Sarah. The room went silent. Everyone waited for Emily to cry or argue. Instead, she smiled, reached into her purse, and placed a sealed envelope on the table. That is when Sarah's smile disappeared. My name is Emily Parker. I was 36 years old when I learned that sacrifice does not always come with the reward people expect. For 5 years, my life revolved around my father, Robert. Everything else came second. His health began to decline shortly after his 70th birthday. At first, it was small things. A missed pill here, a forgotten appointment there, trouble driving at night. Then came the hospital visits, the specialist consultations, the long afternoons spent waiting in physical therapy rooms. Before long, caring for him became a full-time responsibility. And somehow, that responsibility became mine. Not because anyone asked me to take it, because someone had to do it, and I was the one who stayed. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I drove my father to his appointments. Every weekend, I cleaned his house in Maple Grove, organized his prescriptions, and cooked meals for the days ahead. When emergencies happened, my phone rang first. Not my sister's, mine. There were days I left work early because my father needed help. There were vacations I canceled. There was a promotion I quietly turned down. There were relationships that slowly faded, simply because I never had the time. I do not regret any of it. He was my father, and I loved him. But I will not pretend it was easy. The hardest part was never the driving, or the paperwork, or the sleepless nights. It was watching someone I loved slowly become dependent on others, piece by piece, year after year. Watching the strongest man I knew need help just to rise from a chair. I told myself it did not matter who noticed. I told myself love does not keep score. For a long time, I believed that completely. Meanwhile, my younger sister, Sarah, lived nearly 1,000 miles away in a bright apartment overlooking a city skyline. According to her photographs online, her life was wonderful. Weekend trips, beach vacations, dinner parties with friends I had never met, new hobbies every few months, pottery classes, yoga retreats, weekend trips to vineyards. Whenever our father asked if she was coming to visit, there was always a reason she could not. She was too busy. It was too expensive. The timing was wrong. Next month, she would say. Next season. Next year. The promises kept coming. The visits rarely did. Over 5 years, I could count her visits on one hand. Each one lasted a day, sometimes 2, filled with warm smiles and photographs for her followers. Then she was gone again, back to her bright life, while I stayed behind in Maple Grove with the prescriptions, the appointments, and the slow, quiet weight of it all. My father never complained about her, at least not where I could hear it. If my frustration ever slipped through, even slightly, he would wave it away gently. "Sarah has her own life," he would say. "Do not be too hard on her. She is doing the best she can." Maybe he believed that completely. Maybe he simply wanted peace in his final years, and peace meant never asking his daughters to compete for his attention. I let it go every single time because arguing about Sarah felt like a waste of the limited hours I still had with him. As the years went by, our relatives began to notice the pattern. They saw me driving my father to his cardiologist, his physical therapist, his eye doctor. They saw me organizing his bills on the kitchen table. They saw me sitting beside his hospital bed at 2 a.m, holding his hand through tests neither of us wanted to discuss. More than once, an aunt or a family friend would lean toward me at a holiday gathering and say quietly, "Your father is lucky to have you." I appreciated those words. I never expected applause simply for showing up. I certainly never expected to be paid for loving my father. Still, if I am honest with myself, I assumed his will would eventually reflect reality, not because I felt entitled to anything. I never once sat down and calculated what I deserved. It simply seemed logical. 5 years of care, 5 years of sacrifice, 5 years of being the one who showed up again and again, while my sister sent flowers and excuses from 1,000 miles away. I never said any of this out loud, not to my father, not to my husband, not even fully to myself. It lived quietly underneath everything else, the way a small, unspoken assumption does, unnoticed until the day it is finally tested. That day came on an autumn morning. My father had been growing weaker for weeks by then. His breathing had become shallow. His appetite had nearly disappeared. The hospice nurse had warned me gently that it could happen at any time. I had taken to sleeping in the armchair beside his bed, just in case. I was holding his hand when he passed. The room was quiet, lit by the soft, early light through the curtains. He did not struggle. He simply let go, the way a leaf finally releases from a branch it has been holding onto for a long time. I sat there for a long while afterward, still holding his hand, feeling the particular silence that follows the end of 5 years of constant watching. The funeral was difficult, but it was also beautiful. Friends from church shared stories about the man he had been before illness slowed him down, funny, generous, stubborn in the best possible ways. Neighbors from Maple Grove came to pay their respects, many of them people whose porches he had repaired, whose dogs he had walked, whose children he had once taught to fish at the lake behind our house. People whose lives he had quietly touched came to say goodbye, one after another, long after the service had technically ended. Sarah flew in 2 days before the funeral. She cried at the right moments. She hugged the right relatives. Then she left almost immediately afterward, citing work obligations she could not avoid. I did not begrudge her grief. I am sure it was real, in whatever shape grief takes for someone who was not there for most of the years that truly mattered. A week later, our family gathered at Whitman and Associates, a small law office on the edge of town, for the reading of the will. None of us said much in the waiting room. We simply sat there, each lost in our own thoughts, waiting for a door to open. In the days between the funeral and that meeting, I found myself doing strange, small things. I went back to my father's house in Maple Grove, alone, just to sit in his kitchen for a while. I opened the cabinet where I had organized his pills every single Sunday for 5 years, and I stood there looking at the empty shelf, feeling the strange hollowness of a routine that no longer had a reason to exist. I had spent so long managing his care that I had almost forgotten what my own schedule looked like without him in it. I found myself reaching for my phone out of habit, nearly calling to remind him about a refill, before remembering all over again that there was no one left to call. Grief, I learned that week, does not arrive all at once. It arrives in small interruptions, in habits that outlive the person they were built around. My husband, Daniel, tried to be patient with me during those days. He had watched me disappear into caregiving for 5 years, had watched dinners get postponed and weekends quietly disappear, and he never once complained, not really. The week before the will was read, he sat across from me at our kitchen table and asked gently whether I had thought about what came next, now that my father was gone and my days were suddenly, unfamiliarly, my own again. I told him I had not thought about it at all. I had spent so long thinking only about my father's needs that the idea of thinking about my own future felt almost foreign, like a language I used to speak but had not used in years. "Whatever happens at that meeting," Daniel said quietly, "you already know what you did for him. Nobody can take that away from you, whatever the paper says." I believed him. I told myself I believed him completely. But some quiet part of me, the part that had spent 5 years assuming things would simply balance out in the end, still wondered what the will would say. The atmosphere inside the law office felt tense before anyone had even taken a seat. Mr. Whitman, the attorney who had handled my father's affairs for years, greeted us with the careful, practiced calm of a man who had delivered difficult news many times before. The room itself was small and formal, dark wood paneling along the walls, the faint smell of old paper hanging in the air, a long oak table at its center surrounded by worn leather chairs. I arrived early, the way I had arrived everywhere for the past 5 years, simply out of habit. My Aunt Carol sat beside me, along with my uncle and 2 cousins who had driven in from out of state. Everyone knew the will would finally be read that morning, and I think everyone in that room already carried their own quiet assumptions about how it would go. The waiting room smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet. A small water cooler hummed in the corner, untouched. My uncle kept checking his watch, not because he was in a hurry, but because nervous hands need something to do. My cousins whispered to each other about flights they needed to catch later that evening, careful not to let the conversation drift toward the actual reason we were all sitting there. Nobody wanted to say it out loud, but everyone was thinking the same thing. After everything Emily did, surely this would finally be acknowledged. I did not let myself think that thought too clearly. I had learned, over 5 years, that expectations were dangerous things. They had a way of turning quiet disappointments into sharp ones. Sarah arrived last. She walked in wearing an expensive designer dress, the kind of tailored emerald outfit that belonged at a gallery opening rather than a law office, and she carried herself with an unusual, almost performed confidence. At the time, I did not think much of it. Grief affects people in strange ways. Maybe dressing well was simply how she had chosen to face the day. She took her seat across the table from me, gave me a small, tight smile, and folded her hands neatly in front of her. Mr. Whitman opened the file before him, adjusted his glasses, and began to read in the slow, measured voice of a man reading words he had clearly reviewed in advance and did not particularly enjoy delivering aloud. There was a particular kind of stillness that settled over the room once he began. The kind of stillness that happens when a group of people, all bound by the same blood and the same history, suddenly understand that the next few minutes will reshape something between them permanently. I noticed the way my uncle leaned forward slightly. I noticed the way Sarah's fingers tightened, just barely, around the clasp of her purse. At first, everything sounded routine. The standard legal language, the identification of the deceased, the list of witnesses. I felt my shoulders relax slightly, the way they always did when something procedural and familiar was happening, something I could simply sit through without much thought. Then came the distribution of the estate. The property at 14 Birchwood Lane, Mr. Whitman read aloud, is to be transferred in full to Sarah Elizabeth Parker. I blinked. That was the house, my father's house, the house I had cleaned every single weekend for 5 years. The house where I had reorganized his medicine cabinet more times than I could count. The house where I had held his hand as he took his final breath. Mr. Whitman continued without pausing. The investment accounts, including all holdings under Parker Capital Management, are to be transferred in full to Sarah Elizabeth Parker. My stomach tightened. The savings accounts, totaling approximately, he read a figure that made my aunt audibly gasp, are to be transferred in full to Sarah Elizabeth Parker. Every major asset. Sarah. The room went completely silent. I could feel it, that particular kind of silence that carries real weight, as though the air itself had simply stopped moving. I felt dozens of eyes turning toward me, slowly, almost reluctantly, waiting for some kind of reaction, waiting for outrage, waiting for tears. Waiting for me to slam my hand on the table and demand an explanation, because surely there had to be one. Across the table, Sarah could not quite hide her smile. It was small and restrained, the kind of smile a person allows themselves only when they believe no one is watching closely enough to notice. But I noticed. I noticed everything that morning, the way you notice every small detail of a moment you already sense you will remember for the rest of your life. Mr. Whitman finished reading and closed the folder with a quiet final sound. Nobody spoke. My Aunt Carol reached over and gently touched my arm, as though bracing herself to catch me if I fell apart. I did not fall apart. Instead, I reached into my purse, removed a sealed envelope, and calmly placed it on the table in front of me. "Before anyone leaves," I said quietly, "my father asked me to share this." The room fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now, sharper, more curious. Everyone stared at the envelope as though it might do something on its own. Even Mr. Whitman looked genuinely surprised, his composure slipping for just a brief moment. Sarah's smile faded completely. "What is that?" she asked, her voice sharper than she probably intended it to sound. I looked toward the attorney instead of answering her directly. "My father asked me to give this to you," I said, after the will was read in full. Mr. Whitman carefully picked up the envelope. On the front, written in my father's unmistakable, slightly shaking handwriting, were the words, "To be opened only after my will is read." He looked at me for a long moment, almost as though silently asking permission, even though the instructions were already written plainly in front of him. I gave him a small nod. He broke the seal, and the room seemed to hold its breath along with him. I remember thinking, in that strange, suspended second before he unfolded the paper, how quiet the rest of the world had become. The traffic outside on Main Street, the soft tick of the wall clock above Mr. Whitman's bookshelf, even my own heartbeat, all of it seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the sound of old paper unfolding in an old man's careful hands. My Aunt Carol still had her hand resting lightly on my arm. I could feel her watching me, waiting to see how I would react, the same way the rest of the room was waiting. I kept my eyes fixed on the envelope itself, on my father's familiar handwriting, the slight tremor in the letters that told me exactly when, in his final year, he must have written it. His hands had grown shakier near the end. I had watched it happen slowly, the same way I had watched everything else about him change. Sarah had gone very still across the table. The confident posture she had carried into the room that morning, the tailored dress, the small private smile, all of it had drained away into something closer to uncertainty. For the first time that day, I found myself studying her face instead of avoiding it, looking for some sign of what she might already know, or suspect, or fear. She did not look like someone who knew what was coming. She looked like someone who, for the very first time in a long while, had no idea what was about to happen at all. And somewhere underneath my own racing heart, a small, quiet part of me almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Whatever was written on that page, I understood, was about to change something between us that neither of us could undo afterward. I took a slow breath and waited, just as everyone else in that room was waiting. Mr. Whitman unfolded the letter, cleared his throat, and began reading aloud, slowly, as though he wanted every word to land exactly where it was meant to. I noticed, even in that first second, that the paper looked different from the documents in the will itself. It was not typed on a law firm's letterhead. It was handwritten on plain cream stationery, the kind my father had kept in the top drawer of his desk for sending birthday cards. Seeing his handwriting again, after weeks of only seeing it in old grocery lists and appointment reminders, made my chest tighten before he had even read the first full sentence. "If this letter is being read," he said, "then my daughters are sitting together, and Emily is probably wondering why I left everything to Sarah." Every eye in the room turned toward me. I kept my gaze fixed on the grain of the old oak table because I did not trust my own face not to crumble in. "Front of everyone," Mr. Whitman continued. "First, Emily, I need you to know something. This decision was never a reflection of who loved me more." My throat tightened immediately. I had spent 5 years telling myself I did not need recognition, that love was not a transaction, that I cared for my father simply because he was my father, and that was what you did for someone you loved. But hearing those words read aloud in that quiet room undid something I had not realized I was still holding on to so tightly. "For 5 years," the letter continued, "you sacrificed your time, your energy, and your opportunities to help me. You never asked for recognition. You never demanded a reward. You simply showed up." Across the table, Sarah shifted in her seat, her polished composure beginning to crack at the edges. She stared down at her own hands, as though she did not recognize them. Mr. Whitman turned slightly toward her as he read the next line, though his eyes never left the page. "Sarah, I love you too, but there are truths that need to be acknowledged." The room grew even quieter, if that was possible. I had not thought silence could deepen any further, yet somehow it did. "A person can love their family," the letter went on, "and still fail to be present when it matters most." Sarah lowered her eyes. For the first time since she had walked into that office in her tailored emerald dress, she looked small, not angry, not defensive, simply small, the way people look when something true finally catches up to them after being avoided for a very long time. I did not look away from her, not because I wanted to make her uncomfortable, but because some part of me had waited 5 years to see this exact expression, and I did not want to miss it. There was no satisfaction in it, strangely. I had expected, if this moment ever came, to feel something like vindication. Instead, I felt only a quiet, tired sadness, the kind that comes from watching someone you love finally understand something that cost them years to learn. Mr. Whitman turned to the next page, and his expression changed. Even he, a man who had clearly witnessed every kind of family drama unfold across that very table over the years, looked genuinely startled. "The estate listed in my will," he read, "is not the entirety of my assets." A ripple of confusion moved through the room. My aunt leaned forward in her chair. My uncle frowned. Sarah's head snapped up so quickly that I heard the small, sharp breath that came with it. Mr. Whitman adjusted his glasses and continued reading. "7 years ago, I established a private trust." My heart skipped, then began pounding steadily in my chest. A trust? Nobody had ever mentioned a trust to me. Not once, in 5 years filled with doctor's appointments and late-night phone calls and quiet conversations on the porch about everything from politics to old regrets. He had never said a single word about it. I tried to think back, searching for any clue I might have missed. A folder he had once asked me not to open. A phone call he took privately in his study, door closed, voice low. A trip downtown 7 years earlier that he had brushed off as nothing important, just paperwork. I had not thought about it again until this very moment. 7 years ago would have been right around the time his health first started to slip, right around the time the small forgotten appointments had begun. He must have known, even then, what was ahead of him. He must have been planning for this exact morning long before any of us understood there was anything to plan for. The trust contains assets separate from my estate, the letter continued. It includes investment holdings, business interests in the hardware store on Main Street, and 2 rental properties that were intentionally excluded from probate. Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to something closer to alarm. Mr. Whitman read the next line slowly, as though he wanted to be absolutely certain every word landed correctly. The trustee and sole controlling beneficiary is Emily Parker. The room erupted into whispers all at once. My aunt gasped audibly and grabbed my hand tightly. Sarah looked stunned, her mouth slightly open, every trace of composure gone from her face. Even I could hardly believe what I was hearing, despite sitting right there, despite hearing it directly in my own father's words. Mr. Whitman opened a second folder that had apparently been clipped to the back of the letter. Inside were official documents, signed, notarized, stamped with seals I recognized from the county courthouse downtown. Everything was real, every single page of it. He turned each page slowly, almost reverently, and laid them out across the table one by one, as though he understood that we all needed to see them with our own eyes before any of us could fully believe what was happening. I saw my father's signature at the bottom of each page, the same signature I had watched grow shakier over the years on grocery checks and birthday cards, here made firm and deliberate, dated 7 years earlier, long before his hands had ever begun to tremble. My uncle leaned across the table to look more closely at the documents, and I heard him murmur something to my aunt, low and disbelieving. Sarah did not move at all. She simply stared at the papers as though staring hard enough might change what they said. I chose this structure carefully, the letter went on. The inheritance in the will provides financial resources. The trust requires judgment, responsibility, and long-term stewardship. I felt tears finally forming after an entire morning of holding everything in, not because of the money. Because suddenly everything made sense. My father had noticed. Every Tuesday appointment, every canceled vacation, every 2 a.m. phone call, he had noticed all of it, quietly, year after year, even when I had assumed it was going completely unseen. Mr. Whitman turned to the final page. Emily spent 5 years proving she could be trusted with responsibility, he read. Trust is more valuable than wealth. Nobody interrupted, nobody argued, nobody so much as shifted in their chair. Sarah, I hope this does not create a division between you, the letter continued, the handwriting on the original growing slightly unsteady by this point, a reminder of my father's failing hands in his final year. My wish is that both of my daughters understand that love and trust are not measured the same way. The letter ended there. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the soft rustle of paper as Mr. Whitman set the final page down on the table. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed too loudly. It was as though the entire room understood, all at once, that something important had just shifted, quietly and permanently, beneath the surface of our family. I looked at the documents spread across the table, at the notarized seals, at my father's familiar handwriting fading slightly toward the bottom of the page. 5 years of small, unnoticed moments suddenly gathered themselves into something solid, something real. Something that had been building quietly the entire time, even when I believed no one was paying attention at all. I thought about all the small moments that now seemed to carry an entirely different weight. The afternoon I had spent 3 hours on the phone with his insurance company while he napped in the next room, never once mentioning it to him afterward because it had not seemed worth mentioning. The night I had driven 40 minutes through a snowstorm because he had called, his voice frightened, convinced something was wrong with his heart, only for it to turn out to be nothing more than indigestion. He had apologized so many times that night for bothering me. I had told him, truthfully, that it was never a bother. I had not known, sitting in that hospital waiting room at midnight, that he was quietly keeping track of every single one of those nights, weighing them against something I could not yet see. It occurred to me, slowly, that my father had spent his final years doing two things at once. He had been letting his body fail him, piece by piece, the way illness does. And at the very same time, in a lawyer's office across town, he had been carefully building something durable, something that could not be undone by a single afternoon of bitterness or a single moment of doubt. He had been planning, all along, to make sure that whatever happened in this room today, the truth would still find its way to me eventually, in his own words, in his own handwriting, long after he was no longer there to say it himself. I glanced at Mr. Whitman, who was quietly gathering the pages back into their folder, his hands moving with the same careful precision he had used throughout the entire reading. He caught my eye for a brief moment and gave me the smallest of nods, the kind a man gives when he has just witnessed something he will likely remember for the rest of his career. Around the table, nobody seemed to know quite what to do with themselves. My uncle cleared his throat. My cousins exchanged glances. Even the room itself seemed unsure how to settle back into ordinary stillness after everything that had just been said aloud within its walls. Silence filled the room. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The only sound was the faint hum of the old radiator in the corner and the distant noise of traffic outside on Main Street, completely unaware of everything that had just changed inside this small office. It is strange, looking back, how ordinary the rest of the world sounded in that exact moment, as though nothing of any importance had just happened at all. Then Sarah finally looked at me. There was no anger in her expression, only shock. And underneath it, something that looked uncomfortably close to regret. She opened her mouth as if to say something, then closed it again, as though she could not quite find words that fit the moment she found herself in. I could have said something triumphant. I could have stood up and reminded everyone in careful detail who had been there during those 5 difficult years and who had not. I could have let 5 years of quiet exhaustion finally speak for itself, loudly, in front of an audience that had just heard the proof read aloud in my own father's handwriting. Instead, I simply reached forward, took the letter gently from Mr. Whitman's hands, and folded it carefully along its original creases. Because that was never the point. The point was never about proving Sarah wrong, or proving myself right, or settling some quiet score that had lived beneath the surface of our family for years. The point was understanding something my father had spent a great deal of time, and apparently a great deal of careful legal planning, trying to teach both of us. Money can be inherited. Trust has to be earned. After the meeting, Sarah and I sat together for a while on a bench outside the law office, neither of us quite ready to drive home yet. She apologized haltingly for things that went back further than the 5 years of his illness, for missed birthdays, for promises she never kept, for choosing distance again and again when she should have chosen presence instead. I did not need the apology, not really. But I think she needed to give it. We did not fix everything that afternoon. Some distances do not close in a single conversation on a bench outside a law office. But something shifted between us that day, something that had been frozen for a long time, finally beginning, slowly, to thaw. In the months that followed, I learned what it truly meant to be a trustee. There were meetings with accountants. There were decisions to make about the hardware store my father had quietly invested in years earlier. There were conversations with tenants from rental properties I had not even known existed until that morning in the law office. It was work, real work, the kind that came with genuine responsibility rather than simple enjoyment. But I found, somewhat to my surprise, that I did not mind it. In a strange way, it felt like an extension of the last 5 years, another form of showing up, another form of being trusted with something that truly mattered. Sarah received an inheritance that made her financially comfortable for the rest of her life. I received something else entirely, something that took me weeks to fully understand. My father had never been keeping score between his daughters. He had been watching, carefully and quietly the entire time, to see who could be relied upon, who showed up not for any reward, but simply because it needed to be done. I used to believe that love and recognition were supposed to arrive together, that if you gave enough of yourself, the world would eventually notice and repay you in some visible way. I do not believe that anymore, not in the way I once did. Some of the most important things we do for the people we love are never repaid in any currency you can hold in your hand. My sister got the house, she got the savings, she got the investments, People still sometimes ask me if that feels unfair, even now, years later. It does not anymore. Because in the end, my father gave me something money could never buy. He gave me proof that the years I spent showing up, the years that often felt invisible and unrewarded, had been seen all along. He trusted me with something larger than wealth. And on a quiet afternoon on Main Street in Maple Grove, an afternoon that began with silence and ended with tears, that trust mattered more than anything ever written in a will.